Hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening. It's been an incredible week. I am Justin Collery. I'm joined by Frank Prendergast. We are here for the AI argument. Frank,
You can breathe. You can breathe.
do you want to know something funny? Do you want to know something funny, right? I had planned a couple of weeks ago. Remember, I was getting all excited because I thought there was going to be a new model released, and I had said, "Oh, I've got something planned for when that model comes." And actually, I've been waiting for so long. I was planning on having a bottle of champagne, and I was going to pop the bottle of champagne. I was going to pour it. I was going to put a strawberry in the top, and I was going to sip the champagne. It was going to be lovely. And I decided against it today.
Oh yeah.
Um, and for two reasons, but the main reason is that we didn't get a new model.
I'm really glad you said this. So this is really interesting to me because I was just having a chat with someone earlier and they said, "Oh, Strawberry has been released." And I said, "Well, O1 has been released.
Mm,
ChatGPT O1 has been released." But like the entire media right now are saying Strawberry has been released. And like that's not my understanding, but because everyone is saying it, I was like, hang on, am I going mad here? Am I totally missing the point here? Because the way that I was looking at it was this is not Strawberry as such. And if it was, why would they not just call it Strawberry? Why call it O1? And I remember them saying, unfortunately, I'm consuming so much material that I couldn't
yeah.
find where I had read it. But I mean, they talked about how Strawberry was very powerful and could be used to train smaller models. So I'm assuming this is like a product of Strawberry, as in it has elements of Strawberry, or it's Strawberry has been used to train a ChatGPT model. But like, I still feel like Strawberry is this like more powerful thing that is in the basement of OpenAI. What's your understanding? Am I totally way off here?
No, you're not. I don't know. I mean, as I said, the OpenAI and their naming conventions are bizarre, right? And so, is this strawberry? Is it not? And I don't know. I think they kind of call it strawberry. What they've done is this is still GPT-4o under the hood, right? So it's still the same base model. They haven't given us a new model, and what they've done is they've layered on top of it, um, what you can essentially think of as chain of thought, and they're hiding the chain of thought. Interestingly, so they do believe that
Mm.
they've done maybe a little bit more, right? So we've talked before when I've said, look, if you're using your AI, a standard trick is get it to generate the output and then just say, now can you do that again and make it better, right? And you can be more elaborate with that, and you can tell it, go through your thinking step by step. You can put thinking tags even into your prompts and say, fill up the thinking tags and then output your final answer. And so what they've done is they've baked that, and I presume more, right? I don't know, because they're hiding it. I'll talk to you about that in a second. But they've baked that into the model and they've trained it into the model, right? So that's what they've done, and it appears to work really, really well. I mean, the numbers that they've given. So they gave it maths problems, they gave it PhD physics, chemistry, and biology problems, and it outperformed humans at those levels, which is incredible. They gave it from the International Maths Olympiad. They gave it coding problems as well as maths problems, and the base 4.0 model was about as good as 11% of human participants. And when they sort of put this structure, I would call it a framework on top of it, they were able to get the 11% up to over 90%. So that's an incredible jump, right? I mean, it's mind boggling, really, really, really impressive. But I mean, there's a couple of interesting things about it. I think also there's a little bit of hype going on. So, they released these graphs. Another interesting thing is people are saying, well, there's a new paradigm now. So, and I do believe there is a new paradigm in what they've released here. So, up until now, what you've seen is bigger and bigger models, and it was scaling. So, the more time that you spent training the model and the more data that you would give to the model, the more capable the model would be. Now what they've done is they've switched that around, and instead what they're saying is, well, actually the model can be quite small, and they've put an awful lot of effort over the last couple of months into making capable small models. You've got 4.0, which is definitely smaller than 4, and then you got 4.0 mini. And now what they're saying is, instead of spending the compute time upfront to create a huge model, you spend the compute time afterwards to get the model to self-improve its answers and correct itself as it goes. So where the burden of compute goes shifts from before to after. So that's an interesting thing. But I would
Yeah.
caution, right? Sorry, Frank. Yeah, go on.
No, go ahead.
Yeah.
What's your word of warning?
So my caution is that they released. In fairness, they released a very detailed technical paper explaining the pros and cons of the models, and we can talk a bit more about that. But they were sort of pointing to this change in the paradigm of, big models with a lot of compute up front to smaller models with a lot of compute at inference time, at generation time, when you're getting your answer. But they did what I think is a bit of a sneaky trick, right? Where they had, the performance on the the vertical axis, and then in the horizontal axis they had compute time. But the performance was a linear scale, and the compute time was a log scale, which means that the straight line in reality wasn't a straight line; it was a curved line, and you had to increase your amount of compute by an order of magnitude, 10x your compute for every one increase in the capability or the quality of the answer that you got. But there's loads, so that's not. It's a change, right? It is a new way of looking at it, and it's interesting. The results appear to be brilliant. I have my own pet projects to run on it over the weekend, but it's hard too. There's a lot to be done there yet. So that's my initial reading of it.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think we're spoiled. So everyone's been holding their breath for the new thing from OpenAI. And what they've come out with is undoubtedly brilliant and fascinating. But for most people, I think they're going to be disappointed because this thing is its strength is reasoning. And even more specifically, they're saying its strength is reasoning in maths, coding, and science.
Yep.
So, I'm a marketer. I don't really have any call for reasoning in maths, science, and I don't often need any coding done by my AI. So I think for most people, they're not using AI in a way that requires reasoning. And even myself, when I was looking at this and thinking, okay, how am I going to play with this? How am I going to experiment with it? I was like, I actually need to spend some time sitting down and thinking, well, what tasks do I perform throughout the day that actually genuinely require reasoning, to see if I can, make any additional use of this thing. I did one quick test, which I did find interesting. I took a proposal for a small marketing strategy project, and I gave it to O1 and I gave it to 4.0, and I basically said, analyze this and look at the goals and the objectives and come back to me with a stronger marketing strategy. And what I found interesting was they both essentially found the same things. And it was good feedback, but they both essentially found pretty much exactly the same things. But where O1 was stronger was that 4.0 basically said, things like, leverage local businesses. Whereas O1 said, leverage local businesses. For example, maybe you could partner with this business who had been mentioned in the proposal, this other local business, and maybe you could do a thing where if a person visits both businesses, you could give them a discount. Or perhaps you could work out with them that you could leave flyers in their waiting area. You could also partner with other local businesses and leave flyers on their countertops, etc. So they both found the same things, but O1 was saying, and here's something specific you could do. So, for a small business owner, that's much more powerful than just, leverage local businesses. It's like, okay, yeah, great, but how? What do I do? So I found that interesting. It was in a way, again, it's not like mind blowing or a huge game changer, but as a subtle difference, it made a much more compelling case for itself by being a lot more specific.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of interest. I'm expecting, in fact, over the next couple of weeks for you and for marketers and for people that use these products to generate text as opposed to computer programs or science or stuff like that. I'm expecting for those type of use cases, people to come back and say, actually, this model is worse than the previous model. We would still prefer Claude, or we still preferred
Yeah.
4.0 for generating those texts.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I mean about, like, we're all going to have a think about, hang on, where do I actually need reasoning? Where does that come into play?
And
For
then on
sure.
top of that, right, you have, I mean, literally, it's only been released in the last couple of hours, so I'll have a better feel for this next week. But I'm totally expecting that the way that you prompt this also has to be a bit more careful and a bit more considered, right? You're now talking to a model which is going to reason over your inputs. So you have to give it, I am, imagining intuitively, it seems to me, you'll have to give it a lot more context and a lot more information. Because, my method of working, that's when I'm programming at the moment with AI is, I'll give you actually, I'll use that exactly as an example, right? So at the moment, right, in my head, I design a computer system. I have building blocks sort of visually in my head. Okay, I want to do this, this, and this, and they sort of all join up to each other. And I break a problem down into small sections. And then I just go to Claude and I say, here, Claude, write me a Lambda function that goes and does this small thing. And then it's a sort of a bouncing over and back where we run the code, it breaks, you feed the errors in, and you just go back and forth. And you eventually will get to a piece of code which does exactly what you want it to do. Now, in order to get the most benefit from 4.0, what I'm imagining is that instead of taking that mental picture that I have and breaking it into small parts and then working over and back with the small parts, I need to give this new model, I need to give it the mental picture. So I need to say to it, I am designing an overall system which does this. And in fact, I probably even shouldn't tell it how to break it down, because that's what it's doing. It's taking a big
Mm.
problem, breaking it down into smaller problems. And then, so, the skills or the type of prompting that we give to this new model, I'm fully expecting them to be different than the types of the other models. Now, one other thing I would say about the skills that it has, right? So it's very good at maths. It's very good. Forget about physics and science and biology and those things. It's very good in particular at maths and coding. And it seems to me to make an awful lot of sense if you're OpenAI building AI models, to build AI models that are particularly good and able to reason over math and coding, because then I can just turn the models on themselves and say, Doctor, heal thyself, go and make a better model. And I do think that's part of their thinking. So that's,
Mm.
you get the, and actually, in addition to that, I would say that how this works, from what we know of how this works, is you could imagine that, you ask it a question and it generates maybe 10, 20, 30 potential answers. And then it starts to go down some of those rabbit holes, and then it'll prune some of those trees, and it'll say, no, that probably is the best path, and maybe this one and maybe that one. And then it'll do the same thing again, right? Um, to me, it seems intuitively that there's a feedback loop potential in there as well. So
Mm.
over a while, right, if you keep on running these questions through and it's prunes and it's sort of making decisions on which rabbit holes to go down, but then it discovers through user interactions that actually this rabbit hole was better than that rabbit hole. There's a sort of a virtuous feedback loop, which I
Mm.
imagine OpenAI will try to harness as well. So you do have this potential. And remember, this is done at inference time. It's not done
You
at
know,
training time.
I noticed something interesting that relates to an argument we had. I don't know, was it last week? Do you remember we were talking about asking an LLM to tell you why it did what it did?
Yes.
And we were discussing that and discussing whether an LLM could actually tell you why it did what it did, or if it just made up a justification for it. And I noticed so with O1, there's some interesting stuff going on where they're using chain of thought. They're then hiding the chain of thought from the end user. And they've
Yes.
said themselves, we know that there are pros and cons to this. And basically they knew it was going to be a contentious decision.
Yep.
And what they're doing is they're then giving us, the user, a kind of summary that is generated from the chain of thought as well as the answer.
Yep.
But I noticed that when they were talking about their decision to hide the true chain of thought, that they, I'd have to check the exact wording, but they basically also inferred that, they could do some very interesting stuff checking the reasoning in the chain of thought, but only if it was what was actually going on. And I just thought that it was a really interesting little line, because it kind of implied that they don't yet know if the chain of thought that's output is genuinely what's going on in the background.
It's so interesting that different people read different things into the same document. And it's so funny, right? That's the bit of that document that you pick up on. Because the bit of the document that I picked up, I don't know the answer to that question. I think the reason that they're hiding the chain of thought part is because it's proprietary information. It will be the same as them releasing their
Hmm.
weights for the other models, right? So that's why they're
Well,
not doing it.
they did mention competitive advantage as being one of, I think they gave 3 reasons, and competitive
Yes.
advantage is definitely one of them. Yeah.
It is. But I would also say to you that its safety is another one, right? So, and you know that I think that it's better to have private models than public ones. And so if I release the steps that I'm going through in the chain of thought, well then that I basically open sourced it, right? People can then copy it and they can use that chain of thought thinking to train their own models. And then you've got an open source, potentially very powerful planning model, which I think wouldn't be a good idea. But
And
what I took out of that document, though, this is what was making me laugh, uh, was that they were able to better align the models using this chain of thought, because, and that was one of
mm,
the reasons also for not releasing it was really interesting, right? So what they said was that, you have guiding principles and, safety concerns, but in getting to an answer, you may actually cross the line, and you may go to somewhere which breaks some of those principles, but you will end up back at an answer which doesn't break the principles. So therefore, they were hiding the chain of thought so that you didn't see the part that broke the principles. You just saw the answer which
mm,
was still within the principles. They
mm.
also said in the same breath that by breaking the steps down into a chain of thought, they were able to better control the safety of the model. And I think the metrics are way improved. O1 is far safer than O. And again, I mean, I'd say to, people like yourself that, I don't know, have bad night's sleeps over these things, that the direction of travel is to safer models, not to less safe models. And they themselves gave this model a slightly more higher risk score before they aligned it. But once the alignment was done, it's come back into, back into the low category.
But as you pointed out there, presumably, we've talked before about how really in AI right now, it's a commodity. There's no secret sauce. Once you have the hardware and the compute, you can do this. So presumably there is an open source model hot on the heels of O1 that will not be hiding the chain of thought. And then from the safety perspective, it will be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see, what are the true safety issues that led OpenAI to hide this, and what is that going to expose us to when the first open source similar model comes out?
I think you raise a really good point, though, right? Which is the no secret sauce issue. And obviously, competitive advantage was listed there. So they do consider that how they've implemented this chain of thought reasoning. I mean, they say that they've trained it. It's not just chain of
Mm.
thought before was a prompting technique, but they seem to have done it at a lower level. And they obviously consider that that is going to be a competitive advantage. So is that another 2-year lead for OpenAI? Doesn't look like it right now, but it's certainly something
Mm.
that they think, it's going to be hard to replicate what they've done here, and we don't know that until we really
Yeah,
had some time playing with the model.
it goes back as well to the kind of, is this strawberry or is this a product of strawberry? Because yeah, they may have something, they may have the secret sauce in the basement that is strawberry that they are not releasing, and that is, that is something that puts them ahead. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out, because I mean, even the model that we have, O1, we've got O1 preview, and in those, in the graphs that they released showing the gains that O1 has, there's a true O1 model that has even higher gains that we don't even have access to yet.
Yes, correct, right. And I would point out, actually, if people are interested in playing with these models, that O1 Mini is you only get 30 shots a month, or sorry, 30 shots a week
A
at the
week,
O1
yeah.
model, but you get 50 shots at the O1 Mini. And I've read through the entire, all of the documents that OpenAI have produced, And O1 Mini performs almost as good in many respects, and sometimes better in other respects than the
Mm.
O1 model. So just because it's called a Mini doesn't, I wouldn't shy away from it. I'll be looking forward to
Yeah.
really testing Langer too,
And it's interesting that the whole thing 30 roughly 30 prompts a week. I mean, we are clearly the guinea pigs here. Like they're not I think they're probably not giving us the gift of O1. We are giving them the gift of what can
too.
O1 do in the real world. I think, yeah, because 30 prompts is probably not really enough to do anything massively useful with for the user, but massively useful data for OpenAI in terms of what this model might be used for.
I just, I'm not sure. It depends on the quality of the output, and it depends on how, So if I can go to it and I can describe, I do have a particular use case that I'm going to do over the weekend, and I mean, if it gives me pretty much the right answer in the first response, one of the things that I'd be interested to do is, let's say it gives me more or less the right answer, I'll just jump over to Claude to debug the code
Mm.
and fix it.
Yeah.
So,
But even as you described earlier, we're all going to have to get to grips with how to prompt this thing, and like that
yeah,
could take you 30 prompts.
that's true.
You know,
It could.
but to go back, because I knew we'd spend most of today's episode obviously talking about O1. There was just no way around that, given how long you've been holding your breath, especially. But to go back to something, you said something interesting in the middle there, and it reminded me of another story that you pointed out, because you said that with this thing's reasoning capabilities, the possibility for like self-improvement and for building even just building software is massive. And that just reminded me of, again, was it just last week that we were talking about Salesforce, and you said that large software as a service companies were in trouble because AI was going to decimate them. And this week you pointed out an article to me. Do you want to share that bit of prescience that has arrived a lot sooner than I thought it would?
But yeah, so this week, interestingly, Klarna, who are payday loan or sort of a loan financial fintech type company based in the US, and they announced this week that they are getting rid of Salesforce.com. They're going to write this so they've gone all in on AI. Klarna, in fairness to them, it's very interesting to watch. So this, if you remember, Klarna were the company that I think it must be 9 months ago now said that they were laying off 700 call center staff and they were going to replace them all with AI, and apparently they did. And what they've said this week is now they have an engineering team in house, and they're going to use AI to build their own version of Salesforce. They're going to get rid of Salesforce, and they also plan to do the same thing with Workday. And I mean, it as a strategy for a company like Klarna, I mean, it makes total sense to me, right? They are literally, you want to buy a TV, you need a loan to buy the TV, you're going to pay it back over 12 installments. There should be zero human intervention in that whole process. You go onto your phone, you tap in some numbers, you get some money into your bank account, and you pay it back over 10 months. And what the CEO is clearly, he hasn't said that he wants to become an AI first company. I've never seen him say that publicly, but he's certainly going all in on AI. And I think with a model like, with O1, right, if it is good, if it's as good at planning and writing software as I hope it will be, I think you'll start to find a lot of other companies asking the same question: is why are we paying Salesforce or Workday all this money when we can write a piece of software? And I was making the Epic software, which is not the computer game people, it's the medical records people. The project that I'm in at the moment basically takes the best features from that, and we're going to make it work internally. That's a 2 month project, and that was a piece of software that I'd also read. There was a hospital in the US, and they'd spent $1 billion and 1,000 consultants to install that piece of software into. And I'm just thinking those days are over. And Klarna are blazing a path on this. So well done to Klarna. I'm delighted. Brilliant. More of that, please.
And then, so you and I were chatting a bit about this before the show, but Apple also had an AI announcement, which one feels should have been a big deal. It was at their conference, which I've forgotten the name of. It's a bunch of letters, but I felt like, oh yeah, I probably should have been interested in that, and I could muster very little enthusiasm for it. I'm an Apple user. I have a MacBook. I've got an iPad. I've moved away from the iPhone. I've got an Android phone. But despite being an Apple user, and now we're in the EU, so we're not going to get these AI features right now anyway, because Apple and the EU are having a bit of a spat. But did anything in the Apple announcements grab your eye or make you think, "Ooh, wow, that's interesting"?
Before I answer, did anything from the Apple announcements or the products they released catch your eye?
One thing, and it was that they now have. One of the things that I found confusing was what's Siri and what's other AI and what's like. They seem to have a very fragmented AI approach of all these different AIs doing different things. But the thing that caught my eye was if you received a message from somebody, let's say somebody invited you to their birthday party, and now you're trying to remember, where is it, when is it on, and you're thinking to yourself, hang on, did they text it to me? Oh, maybe it was a LinkedIn message. Oh, I think it might have been WhatsApp. Oh no, maybe they messaged me on Twitter. This happens to me all the time. And now they have an AI that can just like go and find that message for you and come back with the details. That's pretty much the only thing that caught my eye.
So my impression of, I think Apple are not doing a great job in AI. It's interesting that you mentioned that, right? The difference between the products. So nothing caught my eye, right? Nothing made me excited. I love Apple. I've got Apple phones. I've got Apple watches. Everything here is Apple, right? Nothing caught my eye. Something else though, interesting. And back, I think in February or March, I had said to you that Claude was going to be part of Alexa, and I expected it to happen around June or July. And I got my
I'm
timing
not quite sure how to help you with that.
It's just so this isn't going to happen from October on. Claude is now going to be built into sitting here beside me. So they're going to build Claude 3.5 into those devices, and I believe there's going to be a subscription, and it's going to be $20 a month. I will be signing up for that subscription straight away because I think that's a brilliant use case, and that I'm genuinely excited about. I can't wait to have Alexa and Claude integrated with each other. And there was nothing in the Apple event that got me nearly as excited as that, and that I think says a lot for Apple as a company. They've hobbled themselves because they're going all in on safety, and this is a time where you need to be bold and you've got to take a couple of risks, chances, which they used to do in the past. It's very sad.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm not going to get sucked into that rabbit hole about Apple and safety and.
I was just tagging it there, Frank.
Yeah. And I hate that we're ending on this story, but I think we have to. The nice fluffy story that you found to end on.
Actually, this has been a great week for cats and dogs all over. For anybody who's watching presidential debates, and this is our fluffy cat story at the end of the show. So, I know, Frank, that you're worried. I love it when I see a new fighter jet that's been AI controlled, or they've got helicopters now, and they actually have missiles this week. I saw were released as well. And this is obviously worrying for people like you. And so. There was a conference.
I think when you realize that they are not going to put you in charge of who to send these machines after, I think then it will dawn on you that maybe you should be worried.
It's very important to be on the right side of history, Frank, and I believe that we're on the right side of history on this one. But anyway, so all these countries got together. They were big countries: China, America, Britain, France, those types of countries, and they were having some policy meetings on controls around the use of AI in warfare, and specifically in relation to nuclear weapons. And they all signed an agreement agreeing that nuclear weapons would not be controlled by AI. There would always be a human in the loop, which I think is good news, except for China. They didn't sign it. Now, what's the point in signing it then? If the China haven't signed it, we shouldn't sign it either. We are now the most dangerous thing about AI, Frank, as I keep saying to you, is not AI, it's the human behind the AI. And this, I think, is a fluffy example of it with the Nuke on top. What are your thoughts?
I can't even begin to assemble my thoughts on this one. I mean, it's kind of like it's kind of like a really obvious metaphor for the entire AI explosion in a way, because I totally see your point that if China are not going to sign it, then should everyone else have signed it? I totally understand that point, but in a way, that's exactly where we are with AI development right now, is that nobody is going to put a pause on development to consider safety when everyone is racing forward. So to be honest, I'm actually even surprised that they got together and had this conversation. So I guess I'm encouraged by that. I'm not encouraged by the fact that China decided not to sign, but I guess at least these conversations are having, and I'll take some small comfort in that.
Well, there we go, Frank. Listen to me. If you want to watch a movie about this, there's a movie called Failsafe. It was made in the 60s. It's the serious version of Dr. Strangelove. It's the same story, but Dr. Strangelove was the comedy version. And that's our historical precedence of it. But Frank, we're up on time.
Weekend watching.
A pleasure as always. And let's find out next week. Let's see what we can do with our new shiny new model.
100%. I'll be really interested to hear what you do with it, because it's 100% in your realm. It's not, I think, quite such a good fit for me, but I'm excited to see if I can find uses for it. So yeah, let's compare notes. Chat to you next week.
Take it easy, Frank.